Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey, hey, hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben.
on Spoiled Rotten.
Oh, that shelf.
Boom. We're here. Well, boom is right, you know?
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk of booms in this episode of The Last of Us. This is episode 2, Infected. We are going to spoil this episode. We hope you enjoy. As I said last time, we could kind of do like a pulse check at the top of every episode. Do you think this was enough to keep you going, or would you have kind of cooled on the season?
I think this has got me. Episode 2 was what I was banking on to be like, okay, is this going to take us all the way through the end of the season? And I firmly believe yes at this point in time. It wasn't just a pilot episode thing. There's certain things that they're doing about this that I'm really, really, really loving. Like and I know we'll talk about this, but the stuff in Indonesia with the I forget what that science is, but of course it's studying
Mycology?
fungal mycology. Yeah. But going to Jakarta and all that kind of stuff, it really is absolutely fascinating.
I agree. Well, not that you needed me to agree, but
Yeah.
I'm with you. This was this made me feel like, okay, the pilot was not a fluke. This is a show that definitely has a direction, and I'm enjoying it. Now that I've actually listened to the episode with Craig, not Chris Mazin, and Neil Druckmann, I could be like, oh yeah, they were 100% saying that their whole thing around love is the whole point of the show. That is their kind of thesis, that like,
Yeah.
this is a love story, and that's not necessarily a good thing, is kind of the sentence they used. So yeah, it's at first I was just inferring things, but it's like, no, they plainly stated what they were going after for this season of television.
Yeah, and boy, what this episode really, really puts, like, hammers that point home, like the toxic, destructive aspect about love. Oh boy, I can't wait to get to that part in this episode.
So, as you mentioned, the episode starts in Jakarta, and I think the good thing is maybe I'm dumb, but I genuinely didn't think they were going to land on that older woman. Like, I saw all these other people looking guilty as like the officer walked in, that I was like, oh, like, it'll be about them, or like maybe they're the ones that spread it by accident and they're feeling guilty. But it was like a very good subversion of expectations, where like even the scientist, the mycologist, was thinking like, oh, they're coming to get me because I did something wrong. And this officer is probably thinking like, oh my goodness, I need her to give us the good news that the other people were wrong. And so there's this really tense car ride as she's like, are you sure you have the right person? He's like, you're this person, you're a mycologist, trust me, I know I've got the right person. And you still are kind of like, oh, okay, so maybe she is in trouble. Like, and then he basically, the person driving is just like, no, like, we need you to take a look at something. So I feel like she might have a sense of relief at that point, and like they kind of bring her into the lab, and the one scientist is trying to give her some context, and I like that the guy's like, no, she will give her own conclusions.
I really like that. I really truly did, because I'm like,
not sully this don't sully this experience by like projecting your stuff onto this.
Yeah, don't bias yourself in being in front of like, oh, I know who this is, I'm gonna play one of my big shot moments for my career to impress the head of whatever. I think
she was just trying to be like, look, this is a fungal. And then because the guy, I'm not saying I like that he did it because I thought he was doing the right thing, but I like that it was this human moment. And I think there's a lot in this episode is about people's like needing to believe something, like they've got like they're really holding on to something, and he's really like, don't you dare put it in her head that this is something we can't fix. Like, I need her to look at this, and maybe if she looks at it without you talking to her, she will come to a different conclusion. Like, this is the second opinion I need this right now.
Yeah.
And she's already like, why did you do it this way? And they're like, well, this is how you have to treat it when it comes from a human. And she's like, geez, all right.
Yeah, they're like, whoa, this doesn't impact humans, and they're like, that's where you're wrong, kiddo.
Yes.
Check
So
out what we
then
got on this table.
She sees the body with that has the bullet head in the head.
Mhm.
So they got rid of they put this person down pretty quickly because
Yep.
the body didn't seem to have decomposed like the other ones.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's where she's kind of like, well, yeah, you got a fungal thing going on here, and this is obviously tying into
Mhm.
the opener from last episode from the 60s of
Mhm.
just like there's no cure for this. There's no vaccine, there is no medicine.
Mhm.
And I saw some people being like, yeah, this is like real, like now where people knew things were going to happen and they didn't like make moves to protect us. And I thought more what they were trying to do was show that like it's not that they're not trying, it's just they're like how people today don't trust the vaccine. They're like, oh, why did it come so quickly? And I feel
Mhm.
like this was showing you that like no, like when your whole life is vaccines and creating medicines, like you have a good idea of when there is something you can do and when there isn't something you can do.
Mhm.
Like you can just be like, well, there's nothing that we have done so far that would fix this in a reasonable amount of time. I know they're saying it
Mhm.
just won't be fixed, but like I took that to be like a little bit more comfort, especially with the vaccine that people don't like in our time,
Mhm.
of being like, yeah, like that makes sense to me that these scientists that this is their job, not a hobby, would be like, yeah, we can make this vaccine because this is what we study and this is what we know how to base it off of this and this,
Mhm.
versus this fungus thing where there is nothing, there is no precedent, so we don't
Mhm.
have anything. There's
Yeah.
nothing to fix this. We're not going to make something up.
Yeah, it's and the thing that I wish the scene went longer, right? Obviously it didn't for whatever reason, probably due to budgeting, plus the scene had already established this thing. But the moment the scientist was like, the only thing that's going to fix this is bombs, and that we hope that it doesn't spread beyond this, and you got to
Yeah,
bomb the entire city right now. Please
everyone
let
in
me
it.
be.
Yeah.
And again, it's like that guy. It's like obviously he's like, this is my worst nightmare come true.
Mhm.
Like I have like this is a military dude. I'm guessing it clearly seems like he's with the military,
Mhm.
but like
Mhm.
you're supposed to protect your country if you're military, right? And the order she just gave is no, destroy your
No, we
country
need
to
to
protect the
destroy
world.
this. We need to
Yeah,
destroy this city. Well, I mean, it is out of a sense of wanting to protect the rest of the country to bomb
100%. And
this
like
city.
yeah, and that's like
But
100%
it's
what a
like,
scientist would do. It's
but
just
it's
like
like, ugh.
no, we would need to
But
do
I
this.
mean, I love the way both actors are great in it. And
Oh,
like
fantastic.
they're
Yeah.
playing this amazing, but the mycologist, just the way that like once he kind of confirms, like, yeah, like 14 people got out. This isn't even patient zero. This is someone that just got bit.
Yeah.
Like we haven't like got to the root of this, and there's
Mhm.
just 14 people missing,
Mhm.
and the person that bit her is missing. And just the way she starts shaking, I was like, this is one really good sound design, but she is playing it so well. Like this, because it doesn't
Mhm.
come off as like cartoonish at all. Like you feel her dread
Yeah.
in the moment. And I like that after she says bomb, everybody, she's kind of like, so can I please go be with my family now? Like this
Yeah.
is
Because you know what you need
there's
to
nothing else to
do.
say really, so I just need to be with my family now.
Yeah, and it does give me that like that whole like I'm glad you brought up that whole expert opinion angle of here because clearly he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to pull the trigger. He doesn't want to do all those kind of things. And this is just one of those things where it's just like okay, someone less educated is more responsible for making a decision than someone that's much more educated, and there's got so many like mirrors towards today's like vaccine situation for sure. It's a wild thing. But like the one thing I will say is when you said that like when they're in the car ride, the tense car ride, and the guy's like, oh, you're this professor of mycology and all that kind of stuff. I actually got the sense where her dread increased, like her stress increased at that point because the more relieving thing would have been like, yeah, you fucked up. You were taking you to jail and all that kind of stuff. But now it's like, oh, wait, you're pulling me out of the middle of nowhere and you found me in the middle of nowhere in a restaurant and now you're summoning me to do this kind of thing. Like, this has got to be like probably running through her mind. Like, what the hell's going on? Why do you need my level of expertise?
Maybe. I just think
Yeah.
her concern was, have I done anything wrong? And then he
Yeah.
basically says no. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it would increase her level of anxiety, but maybe it didn't
Mhm.
help it. I don't know if
Right.
it would increase it, because I think being told you're going to jail would be a big deal.
It would be a big deal, but
I don't
then
think
at the
that would
same
make you feel
time,
better.
but like in my position, like from where I look at from that character's standpoint, it's just like, oh, I'm not in trouble, but they're still pulling me away as if I am, and like all this kind of stuff. Like, what? Like,
It's
it's the
something
idea of like
serious, for
what's
sure.
going on. Like, it's serious now. Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
It's
like she doesn't think
probably a
she'd
different
run a
level.
contest,
No,
obviously. But
for
like,
sure.
what
No.
I guess what I'm saying is, I think you're right to say that she probably didn't feel better. I just don't think
Mhm.
it made her feel worse. I think it
That's
was just
probably
like,
true.
oh, what now then?
That's probably true. The one thing I will say is, like, how did she know how to look in the mouth? You know what I mean? Like, if cordyceps, if that was an infection that only, like, from what we know, is only in ants, it apparently comes out of the top of the head, right?
Mhm.
It's not from the mouth. So I'm like, where does this mouth thing come in? That's where it was interesting to me. I like that she started dissecting the flesh and being like, oh,
Mhm.
the fungal infection is actually like taking over the body. It's preserving it or whatever it's doing. But the fact that she like found the I don't even know what to call them. The
Tendrils?
little tendrils, and that they were still moving. I was just like, wow,
That
that
was very off-putting. I did
very
not like the
off-putting
look of
for
that.
sure. No.
Some things that we learn in this scene are that that person, that was 30 hours after being bitten, apparently.
Yep.
Um, I think this is kind of just proving that this is a flower base. It was
Mm-hmm.
passed on through flour, because this happened at a flour factory.
Where Jakarta is the biggest
Yes,
flour mill
exporter.
in the entire world. Also, what's important is that apparently in 2003, the year that this outbreak started, was one of the biggest heat waves in ever recorded history. So
Mhm.
I think it's just doubling back to that first scientist being like, oh,
Right.
what if the
Like, what if things
temperature
got
goes up?
hotter?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and a bunch of people pointed out. I thought that the biscuits meant something in the first episode, but a bunch of people are pointing
Mhm.
out that, like, they didn't get to use flour that day, like Sarah
Yeah.
and Joel. Like, he
Yeah.
didn't have pancake mix there. He didn't bring home the cake,
Mhm.
so they only had the eggs and who knows what
And
else they ate. But
bacon.
like, it was
Yeah.
like, yeah, they missed out on a bunch of. And I obviously she didn't eat the cookies that were being made for her, or the
Because raisin,
biscuits.
because
Yeah,
that's fun. That's a fun cookie right there.
but yeah, so I think this was kind of just the confirmation that yes, this was fine. And the scientist says, like, that's the perfect, like, surface for them to, for this fungus to thrive on.
Yep.
Um, so then we jump. So yeah, basically that's the plan. And later on in the episode, we find out that they did follow through on it in
Mhm.
multiple cities. But the plan was just, we're gonna bomb it. And I do think it was important that she said, and anyone, like anyone who lives here, because people might have been out of the city or whatever. And she's like,
Mhm.
no, like, this can't just be the city. Like, we need to make sure that, like, everyone's gone. That
Yeah.
includes me. That includes my family. Like, there's no exceptions here.
It's
Like, everyone needs to.
all of Indonesia, like the entire island, blow it up. Like,
Um.
goddamn.
So yeah, then we jump to 2023.
Mhm.
Ellie's sleeping, and it looks like Joel and Tess basically just watched her all night. And I think they're watching for different reasons. Like, I think Joel has pretty much confirmed to himself, like, she's gonna turn. It's
Yep.
just a matter of time.
Mhm.
Whereas Tess was probably watching and be like, please don't turn, please. Like, I think she's more like the military guy in the opening scene of, like, come on, like, I need
Mhm.
I need this.
Yeah,
I
I
need to know that
need
there's
a
hope
bit
here.
of hope. Like, I
Yeah.
need to know that there's a future for this humanity and something like that, right? And Joel's just like, just wait and see. Just
Yeah.
just wait and
And
see.
so
He's
then they get a download on, like, because they're like, why wouldn't Marlene kill you? And she's like, because she was just monitoring me. And we saw in the first episode all the things she had to do. So
Mhm.
Ellie's not lying about that part. She basically explains everything we already watched.
Mhm.
She's giving them guff, but she is being truthful when she explains everything we saw in episode 1.
Mhm.
But yeah, it pretty much just keeps going back to, like, basically at that point Ellie goes off to the bathroom and Joel's like, just come on, we got to just kill her. She's gonna turn. This is
Mhm.
stupid. Or we can go back to the QZ and just drop her off again. Like we'll figure out another way to get a battery. This isn't
Mhm.
worth it.
Mhm.
Um, this is yeah. So this is what I was saying. Like where I feel like this one was really Tess is basically who I was talking about
Mhm.
about an episode where there's people that just like need things to they need
Mhm.
that hope, and this is kind of where it starts for us seeing how much Tess needs to believe in this.
Mhm.
And I did listen to the after party of season 2 with the creators where they said like this is the episode where well, obviously it's not, it can't be any other episode, but this is the episode where Tess is like, oh no, I believe, I am a true believer that
Mhm.
she is immune. And it's before that moment where she says, hey, unwrap your bandage. It's pretty much
Mhm.
in this sequence is her being like, I genuinely, this isn't like a maybe so maybe not situation. I believe that she is immune. I believe she is the way to a cure.
Mhm.
um and so it is mostly her just trying to convince Joel, and I feel it. I like that she's using different tactics. She's kind of just like, oh, well, it doesn't matter either
Mhm.
way. Like we should just follow through on this. And then obviously, as the
Yeah.
episode progresses, she gets more and more fervent on no, she is actually who she says she is, and we need to
Mhm.
do this, and we
Yeah.
need to believe in something.
Yeah, because I mean, like you can understand it. It's very, very clearly written all over Joel's character. He just doesn't want to hope. Like he's just doesn't want to believe in any hope exists. He lost his daughter and everything went with it, right? So like he's just pushing back on the idea of like that there's any hope and that he's that there's something to live for. He doesn't want to get hurt again. Right? That's basically
Yeah,
he just doesn't want to get hurt again. That's the part about love that's just like, it sucks that you can love something so much and then it like when it gets taken away as violently as it does, it just impacts you in that way. You just shut off everything and don't open yourself up, right?
yeah.
But I mean, I can't imagine that this is a world where he had access to therapy either. So
No,
it's yeah. So
no.
like let's
Unfortunately
take that
for
for what it
him,
is.
his tragedy was coupled with a worldwide tragedy, so things
Mm-hmm.
just changed.
Yep.
He did not have because the Jakarta scene takes place 2 days before Sarah gets killed, so
Yes.
that's
Mm-hmm.
there's not like it's pretty much like yeah, his world was going to change no matter what, but he got an extra
Yeah.
um handicap to like starting the new world.
Yeah, because it was just one of those things where it's like, yep, everything from the old world is gone. You
Yeah,
just gotta adapt. It's all about survival now, and that's there's no room for hope in survival. There just really isn't, because that's poison.
so this is where basically I do like that there's a moment where Ellie comes back and Tess tries to scare her and be like, because Ellie has shown that she's very observant and she picks
Mm-hmm.
up on things, and she was like, she mentions a bit of their conversation. I don't remember what, but Tess is like, well, if you heard that, then that means you heard that he wants to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And it does not deter Ellie. Like she sticks to her story. She's like, this is it. I don't know what to tell you guys.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, yeah, Tess is just like, come on, man. Like we just have to keep moving with her. And I like that, like you mentioned last time, the first time she was outside, she exclaims, but I like that there's this moment of actual awe when they leave that hair salon turned whatever
Mm-hmm.
that was, and she gets to see the world, she gets to see outside, but during the daytime, and
Mm-hmm.
how like awe-inspiring that is for her. I found that to be a nice character moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She actually gets to see some of the beauty that used to be Boston, right? It's the old court building that they're going to
Yeah, I mean,
and all
and
that kind of stuff.
unfortunately, it's like immediately met with like, oh, so this is where they bombed, and this is like, oh, this is
Yeah.
the destructive thing. And so obviously, as I said, you get confirmation that this didn't just happen in Jakarta;
Mm-hmm.
it happened all over the world, including Boston. And Tess explains that this means that like it worked in Boston, but it didn't work everywhere. So that's
Mm-hmm.
just how it spread.
Yep.
It was the bombings were less effective elsewhere.
Yep.
Um,
It's also important, like here, that Tess goes on to explain some important stuff that's not in the game, like how that whole cordyceps thing, like it could be underground and you could
oh,
step
that's
on it, and
later.
like that's like it, she goes on to explain so much
Yeah,
about
no,
like
we'll
this
get there.
world and how we get there and all that kind of stuff. And Tess really is the tour guide of this
Mhm.
thing, right? The whole thing.
We'll
She's the tour
definitely
guide.
get there, but
Yeah.
I think one important thing before that is
Mhm.
that Tess is like, well, like, how did you get bitten anyway? And Ellie says, like, are we snuck into this?
Mm,
Or sorry, she doesn't say we. She says I did, and
mhm.
Tess is kind of like, well, like, were you by yourself? And
She lies.
I know that in the
Mhm.
game it's a lie as well, obviously, but like this seemed like she was really like the same way they made it clear that
Mhm.
Tess and Joel were in a relationship. This was making it clear, like, obviously Ellie is lying right here when she says, "Yeah, just me. I was
Mhm.
alone." Um, but I like that you're seeing like this actual relationship form with Tess and Ellie, that
Mhm.
Ellie wants to like learn from Tess, and Tess is trying to impart wisdom, but also is like, wow, you got some balls on you, kid. Like, that's crazy that like
Mhm.
I didn't read that as her not believing her. I think she was just like, wow, okay, like you're really something to like do something like that on your
Mhm.
own.
Yeah, it's one of those things where either you're like, you're either bullshitting me and there's no point in me calling you out on that, or like whatever, but like that's the only appropriate response that doesn't like distance Ellie away from Tess in the sense where it's just like, oh, respect, cool. Like that's the only thing you can do without creating more distance, right? So I really like that Tess actually had that soft skill to be able to deliver in that moment. It's really really cool.
Definitely.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think this is um hold on. Yeah, so they go into this is where they go into like that hotel thing
Mhm.
to avoid having to walk where the infected are. That's the whole do you want to go the short way or the long way
Mhm.
talk, which is great. I love the delivery of Ellie just being like, I vote the long way based on that little bit of information.
Yep. She's a smart one, that little one. I like it.
So yeah, they're in the hotel and basically they need to find a staircase to go up, and their way gets closed out, and Tess is kind of like, okay, I'll go up and see what we can do. This felt very video game-ish, and
Mhm.
and then I like that Joel attempts to get more information out of Ellie, but it just turns into Ellie getting more information on him, like where he's from, like um and I like the moment where she was kind of like, oh, the how many like is it hard to kill these infected knowing that they were
Mhm.
humans? And same with how Tess had like the soft skill to be like just there for Ellie, and like
Mhm.
I like that Joel wasn't like, no, it's whatever. He's like, yeah, it is hard
Mhm.
sometimes. And I like
Mhm.
the way he delivers it, and just the fact that he is being vulnerable in that moment of being like, yeah, this
Mhm.
isn't just like some easy thing to do. It is
Yep.
hard to kill them knowing that they were humans. But he also gives her some background on like some of them can live for 1 to 2 months, others have been around for 20 years. Like obviously we
Mhm.
see the ones that have been on around longer with the clickers, but he's Tess is the tour guide, but Joel gets a moment to give some information as well to Ellie.
Yep.
And I liked that he and maybe he wasn't being honest about it being hard for him, but I like that like Tess he was showing her some humanity and just being like, yeah, it is hard
Mhm.
to kill these things knowing that they were human once.
Mhm. Mhm. For sure.
And so then yeah, once they get up, this is where Tess gives her the what are they called? The cordyceps?
Cordyceps or what, like that's what the infection's called. I just don't
Mhm.
know what the thing they're saying. Basically it's a
But they are saying
network.
like it runs and it
Yeah.
connects them all,
Yeah.
and it's not just hive mind. It's like you step on one in one part of town, and then a bunch of other ones on the other side of town.
Mhm.
She says, now they know where you are, now they come. Like it's like they're connected in more ways than you think.
Yeah. That's something that the game doesn't have, because
Yeah,
once you clear a room, you're safe. This implies it's like, you once you clear a room, you're
yeah.
still hunting.
You need to
You're
keep moving.
yeah, you got to keep, and I like that way more. Like that is a really scary element of just like, oh, we can't just take down one and think we're good. Like
Yeah.
it's a whole network. And I think that's a really cool feature because like, yeah, in terms of fungus and like algae and all that kind of stuff, yeah, they like technically the world's biggest animal is algae,
Mhm.
because like all that kind of stuff, it's not an actual mammal or anything like that. So really really cool stuff to be like, oh, this is how it functions and how it connects, and like plant life and fungal life, it does have that ability, but like amplified to this level, so cool. So cool. I loved it.
So then Ellie sees, not right away, but I'm
Mhm.
skipping over some stuff. But basically, once they're in the hotel, Ellie sees someone who's been attacked, and
Yep.
she's like, "Holy shit! Like that's not what it looked like when I like. What
Mhm.
is this? Like." At first, I thought, like, what? Why is she acting so surprised? But I like that there was that extra detail of like, this is way more savage than that. What would have happened to me? Like, you already saw, like, she got a bite, whereas this person's like clawed up.
Yep.
So I just like that she was learning new things from the people who've been able to be outside and everything, but she also learned something new about the infected. Like,
Mhm.
it's not, she has blind spots even in that realm as well. There's a lot
Mhm.
for her to learn.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. I actually don't think that was like, I can't remember the dialogue that Joel and Tess had after like examining that body. But I'm pretty sure they're kind of indicating that it's actually a human that they know. It's like this can't be or something like that. Like it is like that's the kind of the sense I got. So I'm like really excited to see what other characters we run into and what that's going to look like. Because now I have this picture of like a Wolverine type character running around with claws and all that kind of stuff.
I
But yeah.
think it was just the clickers. She just had no idea about clickers before.
Mm,
I might be wrong about that, but
right.
I've also seen like in the game how it evolves, and it's not that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Like
I think
there's
it was just
bloaters and then like
I think it's just further away from human than what she's dealt with before.
fair enough. Yeah, because like she must have been dealt with like the recent turn, like the runners
Yes.
and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
now the next stage being I think the next stage is clickers. But like there's a few stages, and then like the 20-year-old that Joel actually talks about is actually revealed in the second game, and it's called the Rat King, where like a whole bunch of them just fuse
Well,
together.
before Rat
It's
King, there's
crazy.
a bloater.
Yeah. And then there's like a level beyond bloater where it's like I can't even remember, but like that's the one that throws like stink bombs or whatever at you and all that kind of stuff in the game. It's wild stuff.
So yeah, I think it's just that was her first time dealing with something that wasn't a
Mhm.
runner or just
Right.
an infected.
Like they evolve, they get more
Yeah.
dangerous. Yeah.
So yeah, this basically gets them into the museum, and uh they're attacked. You learn that they can't see, it's kind of like a quiet place at this point,
Mhm.
but more intense because they're not actually good at being quiet, and like just
Mhm.
it is like I feel like a lot of people watch thrillers or horrors and they're like, why doesn't the person hear them breathing? And in this time, I feel like Ellie just lets out like the quietest breath, and it's like, nope, you're fucked. That
Yep.
was it.
That was it. That's all you needed. And
That's all they need.
yeah, and I'm glad that they're like that was one of those things. It's like, yeah, they can hear you breathe. Like if you especially if you do it like that.
Um, so this just leads to a very long and thorough experience with the clickers. Like, this is not, Joel said it wasn't easy to kill infected because they're almost moving, but it also just looks like it's just not easy to kill, especially if you're dealing with clickers.
Yep.
I remember from the game, it's part of the reason why I stopped playing, that like you can't really use guns because the noise
Mhm.
attracts them, so you have to be able to do more sneak attacks. And I'm not saying this show should have done that, but like they're not doing that in this. So it
Yeah.
really was just like they're shooting, so they just keep getting swarmed.
Yeah.
They would have been caught anyway, like based on the information they gave us, but like because they're being so loud with this, it's like it just keeps coming,
Mhm.
and you get to really get a full on experience with these clickers.
Yeah, and let's be perfectly honest here. In any kind of real world scenario where there's actually like this, you wouldn't clear the room. You'd be like, no, if we could get by these things and they're not
Let's
going to
keep
see
going.
us, let's try to do that like 100%. So that 100% like makes so much sense to me. But yeah, like this is the part of the game that I started to disconnect from.
Mhm.
Truly and honestly, when clickers started coming in, because I'm like, and it wasn't that far in the game, because I'm just like, I don't like stealth missions. I don't
Mhm.
like stealth stuff. I hate the idea of waiting for something to come around to an area where I've been sitting at for like 2 minutes just to be able to like surprise attack and all that kind of stuff. Like, oh, that's not a good payoff to me. So I'm like, no, they started losing me in the game here just because of the stealth component. But
Yeah, whereas
what I
I
would
was lost because I'm like, oh my god, like I have to like collect things so I can make more knives and make more. I'm just like, you're taking it too far. I'm sorry, Naughty Dog, but I'm out.
Yeah, no, and that's the stuff I love. I'm like, yeah, let's pick up all the things and
Mhm.
craft all the weird weapons and all that kind of stuff. So it like it's really like and the reason why I bring that up is because the hotel, like all the sets are like basically directly lifted from the game, and it's such a
Mhm.
great thing. Like for me to be like in the hotel, I was like, oh my god, they did it. They actually made the hotel, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing. I loved it. The sad part is like in this episode they couldn't do the mission that you do in the game with the clickers, is where you climb the two towers, then you try to descend with the other one. Obviously, because it's like, okay, we're gonna spend way too much time on that,
Mhm.
and it's not the point of the show. But like this is one of those things where I'm like, yeah, that's a good choice to cut that out from this. Like I kind of would have not cared for them doing a skyscraper ascent and descent
Yeah.
kind of thing. That wouldn't have been so fun to me.
So then I didn't write this note down, so hopefully I get it right. But basically, what happens here is they do clear the room
Mhm.
and they try to keep moving, but and Tess checks in with Ellie and she's like, well, I didn't shit my pants, but and then she looked and she's like, oh, I did get bit. And
Mhm.
I thought that she was implying that she knew that Tess got bit because the way she goes, like, well, if it had to be one of us, and she stares at Tess, but I don't think she knew based on how the reveal happens later.
Yeah.
I just thought that was an interesting way of shooting that, where like she was being like, don't worry, I'll take this one for you.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I it obviously works in her favor that she got bit again because then she can show that there's no
Yeah.
deterioration. But they basically need to wrap up Tess, and while Ellie has crossed the plank, like in the video game, Tess and Joel have this conversation, which I really liked, where it was her just being like,
Mhm.
can you please just believe that we could win for once? Like, just
Mhm.
stop being so pessimistic. Like, this can work. Like, we just need to keep going. Um,
Even
and
Ellie
say,
does it. Yeah, like even Ellie does it. The idea of like, yeah, this is Boston. Like, it's like, was it everything you hoped for? Like, sarcastically,
you know,
and then
she like
like I
said the
like the
jury's
fact,
still out, but
yeah, like
you
lifted from
can't.
the game, but like she still finds the silver lining. It's like you can't beat that view. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, she's finding joy in all these things that are brand new to her, and like that's kind of what Joel kind of needs right now, to have
he
someone
needs
like,
something to keep him going. Yeah.
yeah, he needs
Well,
someone
other
to
than
highlight the joy in things that he's lost joy in, right? And
yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I love that she's doing those kind of small things, right? And even just like being silly and like, oh, if she twitches and she starts like like a child, like she's doing funny things.
Mm-hmm.
She's trying to bring a little bit of levity to it, and I think it's kind of great.
Um, so then they do make their way to the meeting point, but everyone is dead.
Mm-hmm. More
Uh,
about my theory about the violence and how it's only associated with Joel and the
as in
walkers,
the violence that you see.
that we
Yeah,
see. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
100%. I think there's more. I think once episode 3 lands home, I'm like, yeah, I think the theory would be solidified. If we don't see, well, it'll be kind of tricky because I think we're gonna get Nick Offerman in it. So,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
sure, and he's a pretty violent guy, so I'm pretty sure we'll see some violence with him. And my theories can be disproved then. But so far, so far, so good.
So yeah, they get there, and as you would expect, Joel's kind of like, well, then yeah, fuck it, let's go. This
Yep.
is stupid.
Let's go home.
Um, and Tess is not even at this point engaging with Joel's pessimism. She's just
Mhm.
like looking, and I agreed with her. Like she's like, they have to have a map or something. Like there has to be something here so that we can just keep going without them. Like we don't need them. We've got Ellie. We can just go to the where they needed to take her
Yep.
regardless. They have to have a map, something.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's where Ellie kind of piece because yes, exactly what you said. Joel is like, let's just go home.
Mhm.
And again, I agreed with Tess where she was like, that's not my fucking home. Like earlier, it even was pointed out like she's from Detroit.
Mhm.
Like that's that's her home. Like whatever this is. And I know that hurts Joel, but I was just like, what do you expect her to say? Like, that's not her home. She's not,
Yeah, like
she has to keep moving anyway. Like, that's
yeah,
kind of the other thing of this episode proving like physically the way back has been blocked off, but also they've got a bunch of infected coming for them anyway. Like,
mhm.
going back would be trouble regardless.
Yeah. There's no way back. There's just no way
Um,
back.
but yeah, so that's when Ellie's like, oh shit, like she's infected,
Mhm.
and it sucks for this, but it really works out because you see how far gone Tess is
Mhm.
versus Ellie pretty much healed up at
Yeah,
this
it's
point.
healing at that
Yeah.
point, and then like that's what it takes for. I forgot if they did that in the game, whether or not like
Yeah, I
Tess
don't know.
actually goes like, "Look at this shit," like, and whether or not she was healing and all that kind of stuff. But like, obviously, the bite mark is the exact same from the game and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that's different is like in the game, she's just, and I disagree with this in the game. She's just kind of like you don't like she dies when she fights off the Fedra soldiers, but it's not like this big confirmation like they did in the show. And I like what they did in the show a lot better. Um, Even though like sure, like yeah, you have to they're writing it's so it's not the soldiers, it's the infected that get her. But I'm like, yeah, you got to streamline the episode. You're not going to bring in agents at
Mhm.
this point in time, and like it's just not realistic. So I really like what they did here. Really, really, really did. It was great.
Um, then so that happens, and this is kind of like the big thing of is this where you kind of see like that what Tess already set up, which is the people at the other end of town are waking up now and they're coming for them. Like, you kind of see it on that end, and you see them coming towards.
Mhm.
And Joel even is like looking outside, like, well, yeah, like we've got maybe a couple minutes. And Tess is basically like, you have to take her. You had like,
Mhm.
and I've never asked you for anything.
Mhm.
I've never like, again, doubling down on they were clearly in a relationship. Like, I never asked you to
Mhm.
feel the way I feel. And
Mhm.
then she tells him to shut up because she doesn't have much time.
Mhm.
Because this isn't a conversation, and she basically abandons that even because she's like, you just have to. She does say something very specific to him. Um, uh, you have to save who you can save, basically,
Yeah,
which
that's
is
the thing that gets him.
you've been doing this basically trying to save your dead daughter, but this is someone right in front of you who you can't save.
Mhm.
So you can't save me. Like, you don't try and pour this into like, oh, I should have done this for a test. Like,
Mhm.
no, Ellie is the person you can save who you can save.
Mhm.
um
And
this
it's
is what I'm
important.
asking for you. This
Yeah.
is my big ask. If I've ever had a big ask, this is it.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where I'm like, oh man, when you see the toxic love in this scene, it breaks my heart so much. The fact that like she says those things about to him, and basically confirming the fact that they've never actually validated their feelings towards each other like
Mm-hmm.
ever. And in this moment when there's actually the ability for them to finally like start to validate for like the way even Tess walks to like steps to her towards her one step and he backs away instantly, right? It's just like, yeah, it's complete rejection. It's complete like, oh, what was I to you and all this kind of stuff, right? And then obviously she has to make that decision to do what she to basically, yeah, I let me take out all these people in a
Yeah, she's
blaze
going to
of
make sure
glory.
the
Don't let me
infected
turn.
can't chase them.
Yeah, whatever, all that kind of stuff. But then we get to the kiss of death, right? Everyone's been talking about the kiss of death and all
Well,
that kind of
before
stuff.
that, no,
Yeah,
before that.
right.
So basically, I'm just fascinated because I didn't see this as toxic as you did. Like, this
Oh,
specifically the
yeah.
step forward and step back. I don't think that invalidates whatever she thought they had. I think this is just the reality. Isn't in the reality he's in at that moment, which is,
Mhm.
you're infected. What's the point of infecting me by coming closer? Like, um, and her needing that, because then what is interesting about that scene is, in any other action movie they would have kissed goodbye. and it's framed that way. That's how they're drawing in. But she has now caught up to the reality he's in, where she's like, right, like this is as close as we can get right now. And obviously that stands in for how close they probably were when she wasn't infected. But it was like, I think that was more about unraveling something than to show some kind of like further deterioration. I think it was just like, okay, like this is the plainest we'll ever see each other
Right.
in this moment.
And from my perspective, I'm like, oh, I just see toxic love spilled all over this whole scene. Like the whole thing is just like, like I've never asked you to reciprocate. I've never asked you to do all those kind of things. She's just basically living for the bare minimum, right? And I really felt so bad for Tess in that like in this moment, because I'm like, and it gets to that kiss. And this is where everyone's like, I've heard so many takes on the kiss of what it means, why she did it, all that kind of stuff. And I'm like,
I don't want to. I'm sorry to go, but I don't want to get there yet because stuff happens in between that.
Yeah,
so
that's
we can give it its due when we get there. But I just, I'm just. This isn't me challenging. I'm just fascinated because it doesn't. I don't see what you're saying. Like in terms of like, so you're saying this is on Joel's end, that he like the toxicity.
Yeah, like the fact that he's not willing, he's so closed off, and that in this moment he could provide some sort of comfort. Not even saying like, oh, like let's take physicality out of this, right? Because we could reasonably say like he could like have touched her hair, looked into her eyes and all that kind of stuff, or like done something like actually vulnerable to not invalidate but validate the feelings, and all this kind of stuff. But I saw everything that Joel was doing here to be like, yeah, I got to get away from you. You're, like he's already moving on in that scene where she's just like desperate for any kind of actual connection. And it was so toxic to me.
I think that's where you lose me, because he isn't trying to move on. He's trying to honor what she's asking for by grabbing Ellie the way he does to run.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But he is staying there. He is there and he's listening. So whatever toxic stuff was happening before, sure. But as I said, this seemed like more heartbreaking because it's probably the most open they've been with each other.
Yep.
And it's right before she has to die. And I didn't really see any toxicity coming from him in that moment, because he's there, he's genuinely listening to her, and he's not like off doing something else or trying to dismiss. He shuts up when she says shut up because he wants her to be able to have her piece and say what she has to say. And then he understands the whole save who you can save by being like, all right. And he's even aware of the fact that Ellie won't want to go with him. Like he's not tone deaf to the fact that she doesn't like him. They've had this vision the whole time, and that it will need to be. And he's very much aware of what her connection with Tess is, so that this won't be an easy thing for her either. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm interested in your take, because I just see it as the opposite, as a more sad thing that they can only be this open with each other while she's dying.
Yeah,
and they have to part ways.
And this is why I rightfully so, I keep wanting to jump to the kiss, because that ties up my whole thought. So like once we get there, I'll be like, yeah, I'll bring it back home and all this kind of stuff. But like it really, because you're right, in that one scene itself, you're looking at the logistics of like, yeah, you're not going to touch her. She's infected. You're not going to kiss her. She's infected.
People. He could have done what you said, which is like touch her hair.
He could have hugged or something like that.
I don't know about hugging, because then she can bite you, and then that's that.
Fair enough. But I mean, at this point in time, it's just like, if you're worried that she's going to bite you, don't stand 2 feet away from her either. Like I think
he was out of reach. That's what I was saying. Like this was visually telling you about their history as well as
but what I'm saying is like the infection, the area being so close to the head, she could have she could have just started lunging out at him or something like that.
And that's
right?
why I disagree with you that he's already moved on, because he knows all that stuff and he still stayed put.
Fair enough. He does care about her to the degree where that's what he's willing to do.
He's as close as
Mhm.
he's willing to get.
Yeah.
Again, which is probably how it always went for
Yep.
them.
100%.
But I think she's seeing that he was probably closer than she thought.
But and I think that's where my comment on the toxicity of the relationship is, where like, and I think this is true for all relationships. The person that cares the least about the relationship has the most power. Like I genuinely believe that about all relations. Like whoever cares the least, they get to dictate everything, right?
Yeah,
and in this situation,
I
Joel
think
cared the least, and he got his way with
I
the
don't
entire
agree with that
relationship.
because she's the one dictating what they do throughout the whole thing.
Right, but like I'm meaning for the actual relationship that they had. It's just like it's
Well, we
always
don't see
been
it.
on
I
his.
can't really speak to that because we didn't see their relationship,
Right,
other
okay,
than
but
what we see in the show.
Okay, but what I'm saying is I feel like it could be reasonably extrapolated that they've been together for a decent amount of time, or for whatever period of time they've been together, it's been on his terms. And that to me is very, very toxic because of the fact that it's just like, no, he's unwilling to do anything, like meet middle way and all this kind of stuff. He's basically like, yeah, this is, like you said, how I'm willing to engage. And the fact that they were both in that relationship, she needed more from that and she wasn't able to get it, and she just stuck by and settled. And I think that's the toxic part of the relationship that I'm looking at. And in that scene, it says
you're
a lot.
making a lot of assumptions, but that's fair. I think that's fair. I think
you're right. I definitely am making a lot
Yeah,
of assumptions,
I
but until they
think
show us like the early days of when they met and how that
that's what I'm saying. They
established.
didn't, so
Right.
I don't know that it's worth commenting on because you don't. All you see is what you see, and all I saw was her constantly manipulating him to get what she wants out of stuff.
Well, I mean, she's dying in that situation.
No, through episode 1, like things like,
Okay, fair
well,
enough.
I don't want to hurt them, but I mean, I do want you to hurt them, and we're gonna go meet with them, and we're not gonna do it. Like she is constantly
That's
doing
true.
what she wants to do and getting him to do what she wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm saying you're making a lot of assumptions, and I'm not saying you're completely out of like line to make those assumptions. But what I'm saying is I can only go on what the show is showing me, and the show is showing me she gets what she wants out of this relationship based on how she manipulates him, based on his trauma and her being able to work around that.
Yeah, she definitely does know how to work him to get the most out of what he's willing to give to anyone, right? Which is, and we can break that down by love languages and go like, that's an act of service, so he doesn't care. But I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. it's just the entire time I'm like, because the reason why I make that assumption is I'm like, if they're still in that relationship on those terms, it must have been like that for a long, long time. It didn't just evolve into that, right? It's just that's just the way I see it. And you're right, that is an assumption. And I'm making a lot of assumptions there, but I call it like I see it. And that's what I saw in that moment. I'm like, yikes. Even in this moment, you're not willing to give her like an ounce of what she needed from that relationship. Not like what she needs in general, but like from the relationship.
Think you're thinking of the physical touch, but what I'm telling you is him standing there is what she needs right there, which is to know that he's not just gonna go.
Right. I get that. And I'm seeing something different. And it's wrapped up, like I said, in that kiss.
What I'm saying is you're saying he's not giving her an ounce of what she needs, and I'm giving you examples of him giving her what she needs in that moment. So I'm not fully capturing what you're saying.
I think she's saying like these are the things she needs practically, but emotionally, she's not getting her needs met. And I don't think her needs were met from an emotional standpoint throughout the relationship. And that's where I'm going with this. It's not exactly what she needs, but what her emotional needs were and all that kind of stuff and where that takes her.
But what I'm saying is that speaks to her emotional needs of
fair enough
actually being there.
Right.
And listening.
And I think,
that is part of the emotional stuff. Unless I'm wrong, like you could say something and be like, okay, that I'm wrong. But what I'm saying is part of feeling like you're being emotionally having your needs met is the bare minimum. I've got someone who listens to me and then acts accordingly, which is what happens in that moment.
Yeah, that is the bare minimum. It's, and that's what she gets. And that's why I'm being like, that's pretty toxic. Because if you only get the bare minimum out of a relationship, you're settling. And that's all I'm saying is like, it seems like Tess has been settling in that relationship for a while. And a lot of that's on Joel and his unwillingness
to. I do think the real world events have kind of shifted that, but sure.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I 100% agree. Like, I'm looking at this from the perspective of we're not in a zombie fungal infection kind of
Yeah.
world and talking about actual psychology and psychiatry here. I get that. But it's at the end of the day, I'm like, that's where I see the toxicity. Like
Yeah.
the lack of the emotional needs being reciprocated there. Because that to me is where the toxicity is. Right.
Okay.
It's
Well,
yeah.
we'll get to so you can land your point.
Yeah.
So, but I did want to just point out that it doesn't just jump to the kiss, because what you
Right.
realize is
Mhm.
that Ellie is 100% not on board with this, and she fights
Mm.
like she fights more than you've seen her fight
Mhm.
in any other scene to stay with Tess in this, and she's pissed off that they're just going to leave Tess behind.
Yep.
So I thought that was very interesting to like remark on for
Mhm.
Ellie.
Yeah. Yeah. She clearly cares about Tess a
That
lot.
in the first episode, she was all down for Joel to be cold-blooded and beat someone to death.
Yep.
But and again, I'm not saying she's wrong. Well, I mean, it is weird to be turned on by someone beating someone to death. But or activated, I should say. I don't want to make it seem sexual. It is weird to be activated that way, but
Yep.
But in this moment, which is, this is one of us, like if we're talking about the show, The Last of Us, the fact that he's willing to leave her, she doesn't agree with it. She feels more like Sarah from the first episode in there. So I thought that was also interesting. That she didn't just go along with it. She was like, hey, no, now you're doing something wrong. Now this is wrong. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, she's very, very, very human in that scene for sure. Like the fact that he knew right away to like, yep, you gotta pull her away. She's not gonna come. Like that to me is like he's much more in tune with everything that he's willing to let on. Right? He knows that he has to do these things right away. He's like, save who you can save, and like just immediately grabs her and runs.
So then the infected come to Tess. She's trying to light her. We should mention that she had spilt a bunch of oil gas and
grenades,
a bunch of grenades in there so that they would really blow up. I liked the detail because sometimes they just show gas and you're like, why is there so much explosions? But it's like, no, she's adding like grenades and a bunch of gunpowder and stuff. Like this is really gonna blow up. This is gonna be a big deal. She gets to create her own form of a bomb here. And that is where the tendril kiss comes in. And so what were you going to say about that?
And like, this is the rebound sex, baby. Like this is the toxic aspect of like where I see like if you neglect someone's bare minimum, they will just immediately neglect everything they need for the thing that they were looking for, right? And in this case, it's just any kind of affection. And like you could say like what it was, like that kiss of death or whatever it was, but there was something there that she was just like, oh, am I going to find solace in this or whatever? But to me, I'm like, that's just the destructive nature of neglect in a relationship, that it can drive someone to that extreme of like, yeah, I'm going to make out with a zombie right now while I die, just to get some sort of like the thing that I didn't get. That's how I saw it. I'm like, that's the extreme of where it takes you when you're rejected.
I find that very problematic, and I hope that's not what they were going for.
I think it's problematic too, but toxic love is problematic by nature, right?
What I mean is, I think that ignores a lot about Tessa's character to get to that conclusion. So that's what's problematic about it. I don't really think that's great writing if that's what they're trying to use an analogy for. I did hear what they think it is. That doesn't mean that it's not what you're talking about, but that's not what they said. But I think their whole so Craig Mazin, his whole thing was asking about the clickers and like, what is this, like really wanting to get into how they pass things along. And Craig and Neil kind of stumble upon this idea that it wouldn't have to be violent. Like they don't really care about the violence. It's not like zombies where they need to eat your brains or whatever. Like this could be a peaceful passing of and creating that connection that way. And so I'm not saying what I think happened is what they said
Mhm.
happened. My feeling was that she was trying to put up the least path of resistance so that she could focus on lighting the thing.
Mhm.
Which goes along with what they said, which was that is they would just pass it through the mouth regardless. And the biting and the violence comes when you fight it. And so I saw that as her just being like, I'm not going to fight this. I'm using my last bit of thing to make sure that I'm saving the ones I love with this thing instead of having to run or having to fight off these people and losing the lighter. That's how I saw that.
Yeah. I saw it in a very different direction. I saw it as in like, this is the lengths people go to for comfort when they're rejected, in like when they're like at their most neediness, like they're and they get
I
rejected.
don't really see her as being at her most needy at that point, but
I don't know what runs through the mind of someone that's dying in the way that she was, right? I mean, if there was any kind of moment to be like, oh, this is the character showing neediness for the first, I'm like, I'll buy it because she's dying. It's like the person that she cares about.
She had a mission,
just
like she wasn't just like sitting there alone, being like, "What do I do next?"
No, I know that. I know that it's not like that, but that's to me like the analogy that led into it.
I would hope that that's not what they were going for, because
right.
as I said, it's ignoring stuff we've established from her and also ignoring the very immediate thing that she's trying to do.
Well, I mean, she's still trying to click it the entire time. Like, to me, I'm like, every breakdown I've heard about that kiss has been like, if we're looking at this from the lens of toxic love, that's how I see it. It's just like, this is the lengths people go to.
Comes in from, again, not from Tess, but from this being like, we're embracing you. This is love. Come be a part of us. And that's the toxicity, because look what she's joining. But that's kind of where it ends for me in terms of the toxicity.
That's fair. And like, I'm just saying, like, that's how I saw it. That's how I interpreted it.
I hope that it was clear to everyone listening and to you that what I'm saying is, I'm not saying you're wrong and this is the right interpretation. I'm just saying that I am hoping that's not it, and that this is what I saw.
Because I get why you were like, you'd say like, I hope it's not that, because what I'm suggesting fundamentally is so messed up. It's like really, really messed up. But like, hey, when we're looking at toxic love, it goes to dark places. It really does some dark things. It makes people act out of character, which is why I'm like, yeah, I don't mind that it's out of character based on what we know about her in that moment where she's gonna die. Like I always look at it from that perspective.
I think showing someone out of character works if there's like room for people to process that, but that's not something anyone else is going to see that knows her, so then it doesn't really serve a purpose.
Except for and this is only my perspective, her getting the thing that she needed in that moment to feel connected to something. What
do you see it like? She needed a kiss?
No, she needed some, like, to connect with someone through physical touch or something like that, right? It's just because, like,
you do think she needed the physical touch? Okay.
I think she needed physical touch, like a hug or something like that from Joel, and he wasn't willing to do it, right? And I'm like, okay, practically, the hug, sure, but and that's where I'm like, there was probably chance for you to hug her, like, or like something like that, and just not.
Yeah, I think
abandon her, because the look on her
why
face.
You're rejecting what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is, what they did was their version of embracing. Fair enough. That scene is the embrace. And then you see what happens. You see the destruction that happens when she gets the actual physical embrace instead of the emotional embrace.
Yeah, see, that's we're gonna have to agree to disagree there, because I see it very, very differently. I like through the toxicity lens and all that kind of stuff. It took me to a dark place. I'm like, when I process this episode, I'm like, no, is that really what I think this is? I can't wait to talk about this on the podcast, because it's gonna be like, it's messed up. I haven't heard anyone talk about that aspect of like why she did it, you know. But like that's my best estimated guess right now, and that's just what I saw. But hey, I would love them. It's messed up. I hope I'm wrong too. It's messed up. It's messed up. But I mean, like, hey, I've been in that situation. When you get rejected, you do some dark things that you're like, that you think you want, but then it
And I
ends up
think that,
blowing everything up in your face. And that's how I saw it.
I think that's where it falls apart for me, is that I
Yeah.
don't see it as her being rejected
Mm.
at all.
I saw her feeling rejected by her facial reaction when he just like save who he can save and just immediately just runs off. You know,
Yeah,
I saw the
you're
visual
right.
rejection.
I think well, I already said what I think.
Right.
You're watching her in real time process
Mhm.
what needs to happen. I don't think it's really about some physical touch that she needed while she was very clearly knowing
Mhm.
she's gonna die and
Mhm.
needing to get Ellie to a safe place so that her hope can live on. I don't. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't. I
but
think all of that stuff is what would make me think that that's not. It's not
Mhm.
really about Joel in that moment.
Right, because the reason why I say the touch thing is it goes back to the first episode where she gets in the bed with him and she initiates the cuddle, right? She's the one that likes touch
Mhm.
as a love language and all that. And that's why I'm like, oh, based on the first episode, she needs this as affection and all that kind of stuff. So I went there for the second. I was like, oh, she wanted to be touched, and not like in a sexual way or a kiss or anything like that, but just some sort of touch from Joel. And he wasn't able to do that. So I theorized that she went toxic and went into
And I
the
do not like
arms of
that
a
at all.
first lover. And I know you don't.
Yikes.
I don't
Yikes,
like it
man.
either.
Yikes.
It's
That's all I have
dark.
to say.
It's dark as hell, and I don't like it. But that's where I landed. And
That's unfortunate.
yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah.
I gotta say.
Um.
But
So
yeah,
yeah,
that's the
basically,
episode, baby.
well, the important thing, because it doesn't end with that, is
Yeah.
you watch the explosion happen, and
Right.
Joel gives like a glance to Ellie, like obviously acknowledging she's safe now. Well, from that, she made it out of the explosion at the very least, and he keeps going, but Ellie does not. She stays put in the middle of Tess and Joel. Like obviously Tess is dead at this point, but metaphorically, she is not fully siding with Joel on this, and she is in paralysis as we go to credits. She's not just moving on from this.
Yeah.
So
It's
that
very
very important to point out.
Oh, 100%. Like, yeah, the way the quickness that Joel moves on and all that kind of stuff, and isn't even saying like justifying it to be like, come on, there might be more. You know what I mean? Like that would have made sense. But like clearly it's him just being emotionally damaged and like, nope, gotta move on from this. That didn't mean anything to me. Let's keep going and all that
Again,
kind of
I don't
stuff.
know why you're making
And
that assumption. I didn't read that at all.
hey, when the
think that-
showrunner said toxicity, I'm like, all right, let's go dark with this.
So what the showrunners did say was
Yeah.
he looks at her and he blames her for that happening because it was her gasp that started that in the first place.
Yeah.
So
I
he's
would
just
100%,
moving away from her in that moment, not away
Mm.
from Tess.
Right.
He's I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why you would assume he would even try to pretend like it meant nothing to him. I think he's like, great, another loss, and he doesn't want to be around the person that he blames for it as he processes it.
Well,
That
I'm just
Ellie
like, that's how I see
blames
Joel's
him
character.
for it. Ellie blames him for it, so she's not going to follow him right now.
Mhm.
So they're both clinging to this love for Tess, and it's causing them to go apart, and that's the toxic part of the love that is happening.
Okay. I see that.
Yeah,
I see that. Yeah.
So that is how that, and I'm not trying to disprove the other point you're making about Tess. I'm just saying in that moment for Joel and Ellie, that is where the toxicity comes in, not like him being like, I'm emotionally shut off to this. It's more, I'm feeling a lot right now, and I feel you are to blame for this, so I'm gonna move on right now.
That's fair. I didn't even look at it from that perspective of like he's blaming her for her like Tess being bit because of the gasp and all that. I never even looked at it from that perspective, and that makes much more sense. That makes much more sense for sure.
But yeah, that was another great episode. We
Mhm.
did it. We're at the end. Do you have anything else you wanted to mention about this episode?
I don't know. I just like to apologize to our listeners for going so dark with my theory. Like,
I mean,
I made myself uncomfortable with it when I was thinking about it.
podcast.
Yeah, 100%.
You have your theories or your interpretations. I shouldn't call them theories. You have your interpretations of what you saw, and it's important that you voice them. There's no need to apologize for that.
Oh no. I do need to apologize because that was dark as hell. That was dark. I'm not apologizing for thinking about it. I'm apologizing for incepting our listeners.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Sorry for the bad dreams, y'all.
Well, yeah. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. We are part of the That Shelf Podcast Network with other great shows like Bad Gay Movies, Black Hole Films, Contra Zoom, other great shows. So please go to thatshelf.com. You'll find our show, those shows, more shows. And you want to hear older episodes of Spoiled Rotten, please go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. Our Twitter and Instagram is @tdfspoiled. We're on all the podcast distribution platforms, so Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, all those places. So please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends. And we'll be back next week. Apparently, this is the episode that made everyone cry that got the episodes ahead of time. So I'm guessing we're gonna have a lot of thoughts like we did this time too. There's gonna be even more to dig into. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to going darker, baby. No, I'm
All
joking. I'm just gonna. No, I'm not looking to go dark. I'm just saying what I.
If it happens, it happens.
Yeah, if it happens, it happens. And hey, the important thing for our audience is go back to our old episodes because they don't get near. I don't get nearly as dark as I do in this one. So if you need a palate cleanser,
yeah,
check out the Ant-Man episode. Like,
sure.
That's a fun one.
I don't remember it. All right. Well,
it's more fun
everybody.
than that. Enjoy. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.